Alex Nitzberg, we are always glad to have you on Ask the Theologian. Welcome back on this Tuesday from Florida, your vantage point there. You're reading a little bit about the Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts College, which is far off the left end, and yet they seem to be plowing yet again some more ground in the liberal arena. Tell us what you know, Alex.
Thanks for having me back on, Dr. White. Yeah, Hampshire College is it seems to be quite liberal, and but pretty much everybody's cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of we call campus craziness going on at colleges, where students are going to these schools and there's marinating in liberal ideology for years. And so we know that a lot of colleges in America are bastions of liberalism, but Hampshire College has something interesting going on. So imagine combining identity politics, social justice doctrine, and the concept of safe spaces, and what you're going to end up with is probably something like identity-based housing, which is something that they're actually offering at Hampshire College. And identity-based housing is pretty much what it sounds like. It's segregated housing. Now it's self-segregated housing because students choose that they want to live there, but it's basically they're I'm just going to read to you. This is from the Hampshire College website. It says, residence life and housing facilitates the continuation of many identity-based housing communities started by students. These residential spaces give support to members of our community with social identities that have been historically marginalized in this country and strive to counter systemic oppression. This arises from our commitment to fostering diverse, socially just, and inclusive communities. Then it goes on to say, we recognize that our society, through its laws, institutional structures, and customs, has privileged some social groups while systematically disadvantaging and disenfranchising others. Even as we struggle to end these practices, we recognize that day-to-day life for members of these disadvantaged groups can be hurtful and exhausting. Now, let me explain to you specifically what I'm talking about. They have a list of permanent identity-based mods, not yet permanent identity-based mods. And so the permanent identity-based mods include one called LGBTQIAAP. I'm assuming we can assume that that's LGBT type, people. Another one's called queer, so that's a separate one. There's another one called women of color, and then one called students of color, and one called Asian heritage. And then the not yet permanent identity-based mods, it listed Pan-African diaspora, that's one of them, and one called trans stability mod, and one called QPOC. And then there was one that said it was on hiatus for 2017 to 2018, and that was called the marginalized gender identities. And so basically it's segregated housing is what it is, depending on what your identity is. And it's interesting because if you look at the guidelines for creating a new identity-based mod at Hampshire College, guideline number 2 says, and I'm reading you a quote, it says, the group must be unified by a social identity such as race, gender, or sexual orientation. That's in parentheses. They're saying such as race, gender, or sexual orientation. And then in guideline number 3 says, quote, the unifying social identity must currently experience or has historically experienced oppression within or outside the Hampshire community. So this is just very interesting that this is going on at a college. And then
I assume, pardon me for interrupting a minute, I assume they're allowing these students to self-identify into these various mods, housing modules that they live in, like I like that one, the LGBTQIAAP. They had to pay extra for a lengthy sign on that one. So these are self-identified kind of living arrangements, correct?
that could be assumed. The question that's interesting is like, what would happen if somebody who's white applied to the students of color one? And, you know, we don't really know. I talked on the phone to somebody because I was trying to clarify some information when I was writing the article, and the person wouldn't answer that question. What would happen if a white person applied to the person I was speaking to didn't answer my question? They said they wouldn't answer it basically. But it's an interesting question. What would happen? Um, but I'm assuming, yeah, because here's the thing with they have like all gender dorms, and they have I think it said basically in the bathrooms at the all gender dorms or something like that. They were basically talking about bathrooms, and I think they said it was something about self-identified gender when they were talking about something about I saw something about gender and they're talking about self-identified gender. So you would assume basically, yeah. Um, but the other thing they have here, they have something called intentional housing communities. And those are, it says, living spaces in which the residents have chosen to come together around a particular area of interest that will contribute to and cultivate the campus's culture of learning. And so they have a bunch of different ones. Some of them were like, there was one called a basketball mod, the kosher mod, the STEM mod, which I'm assuming stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, the mindfulness mod, the greenhouse mod, so stuff like that. But they had this one that stood out to me. It was called the Gender Justice Mod, and it said formerly Women's Empowerment Mod. And they had this deluge of like leftist lingo in their description. And this is what it said: "We understand our struggle against cis sexist heteropatriarchy as part of a broader struggle against all systems of domination, including, but not limited to, white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, and ableism." So that's like, so that even in their intentional housing communities, they've got at least that sounds kind of nuts. And then in 2015, yeah, in 2015, the executive director of Accuracy in Academia, where I'm a contributing writer, Mal Klein, he wrote an article and he listed some of the college courses that they had back then at this school. So I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll look and see what some of the upcoming courses are for the fall. And so I look up the upcoming courses, and here are some of the ones that I thought were particularly intriguing. They got a course called White Supremacy and Appropriate Whiteness in the Age of Trump. And then they had one called Border Matters, Mexico and the United States, and one called Critical Ethnic Studies from Settler Colonialism to Trumpism. And then, of course, they've got all the weird feminist and gender studies courses, like Queer Feelings, the Emotional and Effective Life of Gender, Sexuality, and Race, Feminist, Queer, and Trans Theories of Race. Now, that kind of stuff you'll find at a lot of colleges if you look at gender studies departments and women's studies departments. So here is a good one. They have a course called A Philosophy of Tattoos and Tattoo Art. And the description basically says they're looking at tattoos and, if how they're a form of art, if they're a form of art and that kind of thing, and how it compares to visual art and that sort of stuff. So it's like, why are people paying to go to these classes?
And not only that, but I happened to go to their website and looked at the tuition. And for a year of education at Hampshire College, if you lived on campus and had their meal plan, I don't think you could do it for much less than $75,000. This is the tuition alone for a year is over $50,000, and they're taking these classes like Black Girlhood Studies for $50,000 a year. I just don't understand who's paying for this, other than perhaps government programs that are granting, and these people are getting scholarships, or they're just extreme. Liberal and also wealthy people, definitely the one percenters, even if they're not paying it themselves, they're the one percenters because they are getting this paid for by the government or by some granting institution or by mom and dad or whoever it is. And you wonder, why would anyone pay $10 to take a class like White Supremacy and Appropriate Whiteness in the Age of Trump? What is appropriate whiteness anyway? And what is the Age of Trump? And on. We could go on the absolutely ridiculous things taking place at Hampshire College, where you too can get an education for somewhere around $500,000. A stupid education that's not going to teach you facts. In fact, they go on and on about on their website about how it's they're into experiences far more than they are facts, and that is doesn't take very long to get into there. I just one more thing I'll add on, let you give some closing comments, Alex. But I noticed that they are one of the highest institutions in America in terms of their students going on to master's and doctorate degrees. And I just think very quickly on that, that's because their students don't know how to do anything. They couldn't make a living. They couldn't make it in the world. They have to continue education and then get into academia. And this is one of the problems in academia, is that it becomes very circular. It's just messed up all through. And Hampshire College is a great illustration of that. Thanks for making us aware of this. Alex, any final word?
Well, just that sadly, this is an example of a larger problem. I mean, we have multiple websites devoted to writing about liberal bias on college campuses. And the reason those websites are able to continue writing, year after year after year, is because this is a longstanding, deep-rooted problem. So this is one example, but there's so many other examples of this sort of thing. I mean, there's this entire conference called the MLA conference every year, and Accuracy in Academia goes there and writes about it, and there's just craziness. I mean, academia is very much a mess. So.
You're right. Academia is anemic at best, and sadly, this is becoming more and more true, even in Christian colleges. That so many so-called Christian colleges are not biblical colleges. And so a parent really needs to do some homework before they start putting the money in there, or a young conservative student as they're making some educational decisions. Not an easy thing to do in our world today. Alex Nitzberg, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you.
And God bless you.